Alrighty, so in this first video, the first thing that you're going to need to do is, of course, create a new project. I'm in a new project here. This is just a first-person blueprint template. And what we're going to do is we are just going to first create a new level for me to just go over all of the basic landscape tools with you. So let's go up to our File tab here, click that, and go to New Level. And we'll just make a time of day level here since these are pretty nice. And then I'll just delete all of this random stuff in the level that is just unnecessary. All right, so now that we've got this, we are going to start going over the landscape tab. And this is basically what we're just going to be going over in this video. So if we click this up here, we'll switch to landscape editing mode. And if we switch back to here, we'll go back to the select editing mode. And something real quick that I just want to mention for you to keep in mind if you haven't used this tab much is that when you are in the landscape mode, you cannot select any other objects. You can only work with your landscape. So if you're wondering why you can't move whatever, objects around, make sure that you're in the correct edit mode before you smash your computer. So let's go back to the landscape editing mode here. And what we're going to see are our manage, sculpt, and our paint tabs. And we're actually just going to be going over the manage and sculpt tabs today. We're going to save the paint tab for another day, or for another video, I should say. And in the manage tab here, basically what we're going to be able to do is edit and create kind of our default plane that we will be able to later on sculpt and paint into our landscape. So if we go to the first tab down here, which is the new tab, you can see we can create our new landscape. We can fill the world if we want to make like a maximum size landscape here. We can adjust the number of components in our landscape, and we can adjust the overall resolution. So we could max all these out, and then we'd have this very large landscape here. We can also adjust the actual scale of it. However, this is this isn't going to adjust the resolution of each of these different segments of our landscape. So probably for the most part, you're probably just going to want to keep the scale at default. But that is about it for this section here. Basically, we can just adjust the size. And then once we have a size that we're happy with, and I'm just for the sake of this overview here, I'm just going to go with this the default settings here. We can just hit create, and now we have a glorious flat landscape here. And as you can see, we automatically are swapped into the sculpt mode. But let's just go back to the manage tab real quick so that we can go over some of the main functions here. So we also have our import tab here. And this will actually allow us to add or to import a height map. So it's basically just an image file that has a bunch of black and white values depending on the height of the terrain. So darker terrain is going to be lower, and then the lighter the pixel on the height map image, the higher the landscape will be edited. So if you were to go into Google, or if you were to use some other landscape generation tool, like World Creator or something like that, then what you'd be able to do is export a height map and then import that height map into Unreal, which then you could apply to your landscape. But we're not going to be doing that in this video. We next have the select tool, and what we can do here is we can actually just select a bunch of these components and we can copy and paste them. So like, let's say I had these selected. Let's say I had sculpted a really nice hill or a lake here. I could hit Control C, and then I could paste this section of the landscape in other areas. So we'll probably get into that a little bit more later as well, but that's essentially what the select tool is going to do. We have the add tool, which is where we can actually just click along the edges of our landscape here to add more components. We have the delete tab, which is pretty self-explanatory. Allows us to delete either selected regions like we just accidentally did, or we can just delete all of these other sections here. We've got the move tool here, which allows us to take certain sections, selected sections of our landscape, and actually move them to other levels so that they can essentially be streamed in to help with performance if you're working on some massive open world game or something. That is a little outside the scope of this course, but it's good to know that that exists if you want to look into it further at some point. We have the resize tool here, which allows us to basically take our landscape and apply new settings to it. So if we wanted to up the resolution of this landscape, let's say we had some false settings or some wrong settings in here that we want to change, we can go to the resize tab, grab our landscape, and we could say up this to 255 by 255 quads, and then we can apply this. You can't really see it too much, but if we were to go into wireframe mode by hitting Alt-2, and if we were to turn down the resolution here and apply, then we'll be able to very clearly see the wireframe get much lower poly, just like so. All right, and then the last tab we have here is the splines tab, which is another one that we're not really going to get into, but I'll just briefly explain kind of generally what it is. So basically, you are able to create spline actors that you can use to deform your landscape. The splines will allow us to create things like roads or maybe cliffs and ravines, and we're not going to be using these, but once you start getting a bit more advanced, this might be something to look into. So that is it for the Manage tab here. Let's hop into the Sculpt tab. So this is where stuff starts getting real fun. I really enjoy working with this stuff. So let's just start going through these. So we've got all of our different essentially brushes here, or all of our different ways of I guess I shouldn't call these brushes. These are all of our different ways to sculpt our level. We do have actual brush types down here though, in our landscape editor, and so we've got a handful of different brush types and brush fall-off settings that we can apply to a lot of these different edit modes here. So we've got our smooth mode, which we're going to go over in a second. You can see we've got the brush types and stuff for a lot of these different modes. And so let's just go over these real quick. So our brush types allow us to either have a circular brush, as you can see here. As you can see, if we go into the landscape viewport, obviously you see this large sphere. And when we left click, you can see the terrain rises. And when we hold down Shift and left click, the terrain recedes. And that is basically how we edit our landscape up and down. So then by getting into the different brush types, you can see we've just got the default circular brush, but we also have an alpha brush, which we can use an image mask, essentially, to change how our landscape deforms. So as you can see here, I've just got this cobblestone texture applied. It's just a random texture from the Unreal Engine starter content. And if I use this, you can see it deforms. It might be a little bit difficult to see, but you can see it kind of deforms in the shape of that cobblestone. If we were to pick something like, for example, this concrete tile here, you can kind of see, you can't really see it at all there, but I think you kind of get the idea. So basically, if you're used to working in Photoshop or GIMP and you have all the different brushes, this is basically the same thing, except, you're painting a landscape. So next we have the pattern brush, which is similar, but a little bit different. So with the mask brush, you're applying this mask as you go. But with the pattern brush, you can imagine that it has automatically laid out this entire texture on here, but by selecting a texture, we can just go back to our trusty cobblestone here. What is going to happen is, as you can see, as we move, the texture itself is stationary, but where we are applying it depends on where, of course, we have our cursor. So we also do have a couple settings here that we can edit, like our texture scale. So we could bring this way down, and then what you'll see is we can clearly see all of the individual pebbles that we are painting on here. We could bring it up a ways, and then you can see it's much, much larger. And we can also adjust the pan.